In the annals of criminal history, some cases defy logic, they resist resolution, and haunt the collective psyche. These are not just tales of crime, they are enigmas that challenge our understanding of human nature and the world around us. From the icy desolation of Siberia to the sun-lit beaches of Australia, these mysteries span continents and decades, leaving behind a trail of questions and a thirst for answers. In this journey, we delve into 10 of the most perplexing unsolved crimes. Each story is a tapestry woven with intrigue, fear, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Prepare to enter a world where every clue leads to more questions and the line between fact and speculation blurs. Number 10 is the disappearance of the Sodder children, 1945, USA. On Christmas Eve 1945, the Sodder family's home in the rural town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, was consumed by a devastating fire. But what began as a horrifying tragedy would soon evolve into one of the most perplexing disappearances in American history. While the flames ravaged the house, 5 of the 10 Sodder children vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and suspicions that would never be fully answered. The fire, which began late at night, was initially believed to have claimed the lives of the children trapped inside. But when fire crews arrived at the scene, something odd struck them. There were no remains, no charred bodies, no evidence of the children's deaths. In fact, the firefighters were puzzled to find that most of the house had burned down, but the remains of the children's bedrooms showed little to no sign of fire damage. Could this have even been a normal fire? Anyway, as the days passed, suspicions began to mount. The parents, George and Jenny Sodder, were adamant that their children hadn't perished in the fires. They believed something far more sinister had occurred. Was the fire deliberately set? And if so, what had happened to the children? To add to the mystery, several strange occurrences surrounded the event. For example, neighbors reported seeing a strange man lurking near the house before the fire. A phone call that was made to the Sodder household just before the fire started was never explained. And as the investigation unfolded, the family received a bizarre letter years later, claiming that their children were still alive, living under assumed identities. Despite numerous theories, a series of dead ends, and even public appeals, the fate of the Sodder children remains unresolved. Some believe they were kidnapped. Others think they may have been the victims of a cover-up. But in the end, the questions still linger. Were the children stolen that night? Or did something far more horrific and sinister unfold with the Sodder family home? What really happened to the Sodder children on that cold Christmas Eve? This case remains one of the most haunting, unresolved mysteries in America to this day. Continuing the list at number 9, the Chicago Tylenol Murders, 1982, USA. It began like any ordinary autumn day in Chicago, but on September 29, 1982, a 12-year-old girl named Mary Kellerman woke up with a sore throat. Her parents gave her Tylenol, a trusted over-the-counter painkiller found in nearly every American medicine cabinet. Just hours later, Mary was dead. By the end of the day, 6 more people would mysteriously die in the Chicago area. All had taken extra-strength Tylenol capsules. All were perfectly healthy hours before. Panic started spreading like wildfire. It didn't take long for investigators to make a terrifying discovery. The Tylenol capsules had been laced with potassium cyanide, a deadly poison that kills within minutes. The dosage found in the pills was enough to kill several people at once. This wasn't an accident. It was murder. Silent, invisible, and seemingly random. Stores were swept. Products were pulled from the shelves. Johnson & Johnson, the maker of Tylenol, issued a nationwide recall. Over 31 million bottles in one of the largest product recalls in U.S. history. The company also introduced tamper-proof seals, blister packaging, and child-proof caps that are still standard today. But the killer? Still unknown. Despite several suspects and theories, including extortion attempts and letters demanding money, no one was ever charged with the murders. A man named James W. Lewis was convicted of attempted extortion but never tied directly to the poisonings. To this day, the case remains open. The horror of the Tylenol murders didn't come from a dark alley or a shadowy figure lurking in the night. It came from the most mundane, the most trusted, a pill taken to ease the pain. It shattered America's sense of everyday safety and rewrote the rules of consumer trust forever. It wasn't just the medicine that was poisoned, it was the comfort of normalcy. Number 8. The Texarkana Moonlight Murders, 1946, USA. Springtime should have brought warmth and relief to the small border town of Texarkana, straddling Texas and Arkansas. But in the early months of 1946, as World War II's horrors began to fade, a new terror crept in. One closer, more intimate, and terrifyingly unpredictable. It began on a moonlit February night when a young couple, parked on a lover's lane, was brutally attacked by a masked figure. Miraculously, though, they survived. But what followed was a series of violent assaults that would leave 5 dead, 3 injured, and an entire community gripped by fear. The attacker became known as the Phantom Killer. The Phantom's method was chillingly consistent. Couples parked in isolated areas. Always late at night, always near the full moon. The killer struck with a sadistic force, using a .32 caliber pistol, heavy blunt force, and even strangulation. Victims were often posed grotesquely, suggesting a sick ritualism behind the crimes. In one of the most disturbing cases, 15-year-old Betty Jo Booker and her friend Paul Martin were found days after their disappearance. Paul had been shot multiple times. Betty Jo was discovered 2 miles away, her body dumped behind a tree. The town, already in panic, erupted into chaos. Gun sales surged, schools closed, law enforcement officers from Texas, Arkansas, and even the FBI flooded the area. But despite a sprawling investigation, the killer was never identified. Dozens of suspects were interrogated. One man, Yoel Swinney, was briefly considered the prime suspect, even confessing indirectly, but the evidence was too thin to hold him. The violence ended as abruptly as it began. The Phantom vanished into legend, leaving behind only whispers, speculation, and scars. Decades later, the case inspired the cult horror film The Town That Dreaded Sundown. But the real story is more terrifying than fiction, because the most frightening monsters aren't ghosts or ghouls. They're you and me. They're real people, hidden behind masks, who vanished before dawn. Number 7. The Tamam Shud Case, 1948, Australia. It was the morning of December 1st, 1948, when a man's body was found slumped against a sea wall on Somerton Beach, just outside Adelaide, Australia. He was immaculately dressed in a pressed suit. Oddly, his polished shoes were free of sand. There were no signs of trauma, he had no identification, and the tags on his clothing had all been meticulously removed. He had a half-smoked cigarette balanced behind his ear and an unreadable expression fixed on his face. Despite an international investigation, the man dubbed the Somerton Man could not be identified. The mystery only deepened when a tiny rolled-up piece of scrap paper was found hidden in a secret pocket of his trousers. On it were written two cryptic Persian words, Tamam, Shud, translated as ended or finished. That note led detectives to a rare copy of a book of Persian poetry, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, found tossed in the back seat of an unlocked car near the beach. Inside the book were more twists, an unlisted phone number, a code that has never been deciphered, and indication of strange connections that pointed to espionage. The case unfolded like a Cold War spy novel. The man had no record, no matching dental history, and left behind no fingerprints in any known database. Some speculated he was a poisoned spy. Others believed he had taken his own life in a cryptic symbolic gesture. The trail led nowhere definitive, and Australia was left haunted by a riddle it couldn't solve. Finally, in 2022, researchers gave the Somerton Man a name, Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. But even with an identity, the questions remain. Why was he in Adelaide? Who did he know? And why did he die with a cipher, a poem, and a mystery that has endured for over 70 years? Number 6. The Boy in the Box, 1957, USA. On a cold February morning in 1957, a small cardboard box, discarded like trash in the woods of Philadelphia, held a mystery that would haunt the nation for decades. Inside the box, the lifeless body of a young boy was found. He appeared to be no older than 4 or 5, malnourished and bruised, his small frame showing signs of horrific abuse. This tragic discovery would lead to one of the most haunting unsolved crimes in American history. The boy's identity was a riddle wrapped in layers of sorrow. Who was he? Where did he come from? And how did he end up in that box, abandoned and left to die? No one could answer. The authorities launched a massive investigation, but every lead turned cold. The boy had no name, no family, and no trace of where he might have come from. His death seemed to be a cruel, deliberate act of violence, but the motive was unclear. The most chilling detail was the state of his body. He had been brutally beaten and malnourished, and his hair had been crudely chopped. There were no fingerprints to identify him. His clothing, a plain, unmarked shirt, offered no clues. The case seemed to grow colder with each passing year, as new theories emerged, but nothing ever came close to solving the mystery. It wasn't until decades later that a breakthrough came. In 2022, advances in DNA technology led to the identification of the boy as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Yet, even with his name now known, the circumstances surrounding his death remained shrouded in darkness. Was he the victim of a troubled family, or was there something even darker at play? The Boy in the Box remains one of the most heart-wrenching unsolved cases in criminal history. His name may have been uncovered, but the truth behind his tragic fate continues to elude justice. Number 5. The Isdal Woman, 1970, Norway. In the dark, jagged hills of Norway's Isdalen Valley, the body of an unidentified woman was found in November 1970. She was burned beyond recognition, her face charred and contorted, and her body abandoned like a discarded husk in the unforgiving wilderness. The case would become one of Norway's most perplexing mysteries, one that has never been solved. The Isdal woman, as she came to be known, had no name, no identification, and no clear motive behind her death. Her personal items, like her clothes, were stripped of any labels or tags. Her fingerprints had been intentionally sanded off, and most disturbing of all, she was found near a trail that was commonly used by hikers, but there was no sign of a struggle, no indication that she had been forced into the woods. Authorities discovered that she had been traveling alone and used multiple passports with different names, adding layers to the enigma. The codes and cryptic notes found with her body further suggested something far more sinister than a simple murder. Was this a case of international espionage? Had she been a secret agent, like the man from the Tamam Shud case, involved in covert activities in the Cold War? To this day, the Isdal woman's identity remains a mystery. Some speculate she was a spy, and others believe she was part of a complex network of individuals working undercover. Yet, despite decades of investigation and numerous theories, the woman's true identity and the circumstances of her death have never been definitely determined. The case still lingers in the minds of those who study it, each theory more twisted than the last. Was she a victim of a covert operation, or was her death the result of something far darker, something that she had no control over, something meant to be erased from history forever? Number 4. The Hinterkaifeck Murders, 1922, Germany. Imagine a remote farmstead in the Bavarian countryside, an isolated, weathered farmhouse surrounded by acres of snowy fields, with only the wind and the whisper of trees for company. This is where the Gruber family, 6 members in total, lived in eerie solitude, far away from the nearest village. But this quiet life would end in horror, one of the most disturbing and inexplicable murders in German history. In March 1922, the family's farm was discovered abandoned, but what authorities would find inside was far worse than anything they could have imagined. 6 members of the Gruber family, Andreas, his wife, their daughter, and their 3 grandchildren, had been brutally murdered in cold blood. The most chilling part? The killer had remained on the property for days after the murders, living amongst the bodies, feeding the animals, and even cooking meals. Just days before the murders, Andreas Gruber had reported hearing strange footsteps in the attic. He discovered unfamiliar footprints in the snow surrounding the farm. But despite these ominous signs, the family remained unaware of the danger lurking nearby. It was as if the killer had blended seamlessly into the isolated farmhouse, making it their temporary home. Who would commit such a horrific act? And why? Was it a personal vendetta, or was the killer simply a stranger? Theories abound, but no one was ever caught. Some believe the killer was a member of the family, while others point to a mysterious handyman. But nothing could ever be proven. Forensics from the time were far from conclusive, and the case quickly turned cold. To this day, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved, an unspeakable crime that haunts the town of Groben, and a chilling reminder that in the most isolated corners of the world, darkness can quietly take root. Number 3. The Zodiac Killer, 1960s to 1970s USA. We're in Northern California, 1968. A couple sits in a car on a quiet lover's lane. Moments later, gunshots pierce the night. The two are left bleeding, one dead. This was just the beginning. Over the next several years, a faceless predator calling himself the Zodiac terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area. He didn't just kill, he played a game of taunts, ciphers, and letters sent to the press and police, each one more chilling than the last. "I like killing people because it's so much fun," he wrote in his first cipher. The Zodiac claimed 37 victims, though only 5 were ever confirmed. His attacks were brutal, erratic, and cruel. Shootings, stabbings, and brazen threats delivered with a cold precision. Sometimes he wore a black hood with a white crosshair symbol. Sometimes he struck in broad daylight. The public was gripped by fear. The police were outsmarted. The ciphers he sent, some still unsolved, were a twisted calling card, mocking those who hunted him. And despite suspects, composite sketches, and endless theories, his identity has never been proven. In 2020, amateur codebreakers finally cracked one of the Zodiac's infamous ciphers, 51 years after it was sent. It revealed no confession, just more gloating. "I am not afraid of the gas chamber," he wrote. One suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, stood out, but no definitive evidence linked him to the murders. Others have come and gone in public speculation, from journalists to military men, even copycat killers. But the Zodiac vanished, his final letter in 1974 signing off with a chilling goodbye. "Me, 37, San Francisco Police Department, 0. The Zodiac Killer remains a symbol of mystery, fear, and obsession. Somewhere out there, did he simply blend back into ordinary life, never to strike again? Or was he never done? Number 2. The Black Dahlia Murder, 1947 USA. In post-war Los Angeles, dreams were big, and so were the secrets. On the chilly morning of January 15, 1947, a woman out walking her child discovered what she first mistook for a broken mannequin in a vacant lot in the Limert Park district. But this was no mannequin. It was the mutilated body of 22-year-old Elizabeth Short, a young, aspiring actress who would forever be etched into American true crime lore as the Black Dahlia. Elizabeth's body had been severed at the waist, completely drained of blood and eerily posed. The killer had meticulously washed her corpse and carved a grotesque smile into her face. The brutality and precision suggested a methodical, possibly medically trained perpetrator. But who? And why? The press quickly sensationalized the case. Elizabeth's mysterious past, dramatic photographs, and haunting beauty added fuel to the fire. Dozens of false confessions came streaming in, and the LAPD investigated hundreds of suspects. Yet, no one was ever charged. One of the most compelling theories points to George Hodel, a wealthy doctor with a dark history and disturbing connections. His own son, a former LAPD homicide detective, later accused him of the murder, citing hidden photographs, suspicious medical knowledge, and access to surgical equipment. Still, no charges were filed, and George died a free man. To this day, the Black Dahlia murder remains one of America's most notorious unsolved crimes. It's a tale of Hollywood glamour, darkness behind the spotlight, and a young woman whose tragic death still etches through time. Was it a crime of passion, a calculated work of a sociopath, or something darker hidden within the fabric of 1940s Los Angeles? We may never know. Number 1. The Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959, Soviet Union. In 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out into the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia. They were students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, and their goal was to reach the summit of Mount Otorten, a remote and icy peak. These weren't amateurs. They were seasoned trekkers, well prepared for the journey. But they would never return. Weeks passed with no contact, and a search team was sent out. What they discovered in the snowy wilderness would spark decades of speculation and fear. The hikers' tent was found torn open from the inside. Their belongings were left behind, but the hikers had vanished, some without shoes, others without warm clothing, in sub-zero temperatures. The bodies were discovered scattered around the area. 2 were found near a tree, barefoot and in their underwear, as if they had fled in a panic. 3 more were located between the tree and the tent, frozen as if trying to return. But it was the last 4 bodies, found months later in a ravine, that deepened the mystery. These final victims had horrific injuries. One had a fractured skull, another had broken ribs, and one woman was missing her tongue and eyes. Yet, there were no external wounds to match the trauma. It looked as if something had crushed them from the inside out. Soviet investigators ruled the cause of death as a compelling natural force, but no explanation was ever given. Theories range from avalanches to secret military experiments, to even more unsettling possibilities. But to this day, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most chilling, unsolved mysteries in modern history. And there you have it, 10 of the most mysterious and unsettling true crime cases the world has ever known. Some ended in shocking revelations, while others remain unsolved, their answers buried in time. These stories remind us that real life can be stranger and far more chilling than fiction. But here's the thing. Behind every case there's a human story, a family searching for answers, a community changed forever, a chilling question that still lingers. Tell us which of these mysteries haunted you the most. Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoy diving into dark and unexplained things, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.